The truth beneath the surface. When I first walked into my job at Calder Enterprises, a shiny, sprawling tech company with pristine glass walls and over-polished floors, I was desperate. I'd been in and out of interviews for months, swimming in debt, and holding on to a frayed strand of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the fresh start I needed. This was where my life could turn around. My name is Emma Graves. And what I didn't know back then was that this seemingly perfect company was hiding secrets that would change the course of my life forever. This isn't just a story of uncovering corruption. It's a story of justice, heartbreak, betrayal, and a revenge so satisfying. I still get chills thinking about it. A shiny beginning. The first few months were bliss. Or at least, they seemed to be. Calder Enterprises was a well-oiled machine. On the surface, it was just as shiny as its polished office floors. Everyone smiled, and everyone was busy. Corporate synergy, they called it. My first day was spent at endless meetings and orientation sessions, with a dozen faces I didn't know flashing toothy grins my way. But there was one face I'll never forget. Mark Ashford. He was the golden boy of Calder, vice president of operations. Walk-in closets full of tailored suits and an attitude so smug it could suffocate a room. He wasn't just admired, he was worshipped, and for reasons I still can't fully explain. He decided I was worth noticing. As an entry-level analyst, I barely existed in Calder's ecosystem. But Mark found reasons to drop by my desk. At first, it was little things. Questions about the quarterly report. A random compliment on my efficiency. Then it became larger gestures. Invitations to meetings I had no business attending. Jokes meant just for me in a crowded room. His attention was intoxicating and terrifying. And every time I smiled back at him, I felt as though I was betraying myself. Yet I couldn't stop. Cracks in the facade. Fast forward 6 months, and I'd settled into the hum of corporate life. By then, Mark's charm had worn thin, replaced by a gnawing unease that I couldn't quite shake. Something was off about Calder Enterprises, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Not yet. It started with the inconsistencies. A report showed Calder earning profits in the millions. Yet the budget for our department had been mysteriously slashed. The HR system logged 3 new hires, but their desks sat empty. Then there was Mark himself. He'd stroll into meetings touting grand projects and partnerships. Yet no one could verify a single shred of evidence to back his claims. My gut told me something was wrong. And against every instinct whispering for me to stay quiet, I started digging. The first time I snooped through files I probably shouldn't have accessed. I half expected alarms to blare and security guards to haul me out of the building. Instead, the system opened up like a treasure trove, revealing discrepancies so glaring I couldn't believe everyone had missed them. Contracts with fake vendors, payments routed to offshore accounts, quarterly reports doctored to erase losses that should have sunk the company years ago. I should have stopped there. Maybe I could have handed over the evidence anonymously, washed my hands of it, and walked away. But the deeper I went, the darker it got. The catalyst. The turning point came late one evening during overtime. The office was eerily quiet, with only the hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic tapping of my keyboard filling the void. I was poring over transaction logs when I discovered a document Mark had uploaded just hours earlier. It was a falsified compliance file, an outright fabrication meant to cover up a $20 million embezzlement scheme. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. That's when it hit me. Mark wasn't just some opportunist bending the rules. He was the architect of Calder's corruption. The reason employees were being laid off and projects were mysteriously cancelled. He was building his empire on lies. And Calder was letting him do it. I couldn't let it slide. Not this time. Confrontation. The next morning, I walked into the office with fire in my veins. I'd printed the document, slipped it into my bag, and rehearsed the confrontation in my head 100 times. I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't care if I lost my job. Mark Ashford was going to answer for what he'd done, and I was going to be the one to make him. I waited until the end of the day when most of my coworkers had cleared out. Mark's office was on the top floor, a modern glass cube filled with sleek furniture and the faint scent of leather. He was sitting at his desk when I stormed in unannounced. "Emma," he said smoothly, his smile bordering on predatory. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Quote, I tossed the document onto his desk before I lost my nerve. "Explain this." Mark's smile froze as his eyes scanned the paper. He didn't flinch, didn't stammer. In fact, he had the audacity to laugh. A low, condescending chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Emma, you don't understand how this works," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Do you know how many people benefit from this? The board, the investors, even the government. Calder is thriving because of me. And you want to ruin that over a technicality?" Quote, "A technicality?" My voice rose. "This isn't some harmless mistake. You're stealing from your own employees. From people who trust this company. You're tanking the future of Calder. All for your own gain." Mark's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You're out of your depth. Emma, if you think you can challenge me, you're wrong. You'll lose your job, your reputation, everything." He stood, towering over me, and for a moment, I felt small and powerless. But then I remembered why I was there. The faces of my coworkers who'd been laid off without warning. The projects that had been sabotaged. The lies I'd uncovered. I wasn't about to back down. "I don't care what you threaten me with," I said with steel in my voice. "I'm not going to let you get away with this. The revenge plan." That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark's mocking laughter echoed in my head. His words taunting me like a broken record. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life. And that anger became fuel for the plan I began to construct. The next day, I called Liam, Calder's IT manager and someone I trusted implicitly. Liam was a quiet, meticulous man with a deep sense of integrity. And I knew if anyone could help me, it was him. "I need access to everything," I said. "Emails, financial reports, contracts, anything connected to Mark Ashford." Liam stared at me, his brow furrowing in concern. "Emma, what are you planning?" Quote, "Justice," I said simply. For weeks, Liam and I worked in secret, combing through every piece of data we could find. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Mark hadn't just embezzled funds. He'd blackmailed vendors, falsified audits, and orchestrated layoffs to cover up his tracks. The scope of his crimes was staggering, and the evidence was damning. By the time we were finished, we had a mountain of proof that could crush Mark's career and Calder's reputation. But I wasn't going to stop there. The execution. The day of reckoning came during Calder's quarterly town hall meeting, attended by every employee and broadcasted live to investors. I waited until Mark took the stage, his signature smirk plastered across his face as he delivered his usual spiel about growth and innovation. As he spoke, I kept glancing at Liam, who was seated at the back of the room with his laptop. When I gave him the nod, he hit enter, and the presentation screen behind Mark flickered before displaying a damning slideshow of evidence. Emails, invoices, and contracts proving every crime Mark had committed. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, shouts of disbelief. all aimed at the man who'd just been exposed as the architect of Calder's downfall. "What is this?" Mark demanded, his voice laced with panic. "It's the truth," I said, standing up from my seat. "You've been lying to this company for years, stealing from your employees and investors. And now, everyone knows." Security escorted Mark out as the board scrambled to salvage their reputation. Liam and I handed over the evidence to law enforcement, ensuring Mark would face criminal charges for his actions. Calder Enterprises would never be the same, but for the first time in years, it had a chance to rebuild, to become something better. Aftermath. People often ask if it was worth it, if the sacrifice, the risk, and the fallout were worth the revenge I sought. The truth is, it was never about revenge. It was about justice. It was about standing up for the people who'd been hurt, for the truth that had been buried beneath lies. Mark Ashford lost everything. His career, his freedom, his reputation. Calder Enterprises survived, but it took years to recover, and its leadership was replaced by people who understood the value of integrity. As for me, I left Calder shortly after the dust settled. I needed a fresh start, and while my new path was uncertain, I walked it with my head held high, knowing I had done the right thing. Sometimes, I still think about that moment in Mark's office, the confrontation that sparked it all. I wonder if he ever realized how his arrogance and greed led to his downfall. But I don't dwell on it for long. After all, the truth has a way of catching up with people, and when it does, there's no escaping it. Aftermath. A deeper dive into revenge fulfilled. The immediate aftermath of Mark Ashford's downfall was a whirlwind, a chaotic dance of relief, pain, and reflection. The office was never the same after the town hall meeting. How could it be? What I hadn't expected was how deeply the fallout would affect me personally. Yes, I'd won, but at what cost to my sense of safety and sanity? The silence that followed. The days after the town hall were almost eerily quiet. Calder Enterprises was still abuzz with whispers and hushed conversations in corridors. But people avoided me. I'd gone from being another cog in the corporate wheel to someone people didn't know how to approach. It was as if my mere presence reminded them of the fragility of their world. They smiled awkwardly, gave me polite nods, but no one dared linger in my orbit. The office itself felt heavier, darker, stripped of the glossy allure it once held. The great illusion of Calder Enterprises, the veneer of synergy and progress, had shattered like glass. Walking through the halls, I noticed details I had overlooked before. The tension in people's shoulders, the solemn, hunched backs of managers who knew they'd been complicit in enabling Mark's schemes. The clean white walls of the office, once comforting in their sterility, now felt barren, like walking through a graveyard of lies. I spent those days buried in my thoughts, alternating between pride and anxiety. Pride in knowing I had delivered the justice Mark deserved. Anxiety about what might come next. I'd taken on a Goliath. Yes, but my David-sized victory didn't leave me unscathed. Conversations with the broken. There was one moment I'll never forget. A meeting with Sarah from accounting, who had been one of Mark's pawns. She had worked directly under him for years, managing transactions that, unbeknownst to her, helped mask his embezzlement. I found her one afternoon, sitting alone in the break room, staring into the depths of her coffee mug as though it held the secrets of the universe. When I walked in, her shoulders tensed, but she didn't look up. I hesitated before sinking into the chair across from her. "Sarah," I started gently. "How are you holding up?" She let out a bitter laugh, finally meeting my gaze. Her red-rimmed eyes revealed sleepless nights and heavy cries. "Holding up? I don't even know what that means anymore." You destroyed him. Emma. You destroyed my boss. And part of me feels terrible about it. But the other part, she paused, gripping her mug tightly. Quote, the other part feels liberated. Like I've been walking around with chains I didn't know I was wearing. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that she wasn't angry with me. She was angry with herself. For ignoring the warning signs. For trusting Mark too deeply. For not asking questions that might have saved her years of misplaced loyalty. I didn't mean to hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, I said after a moment. All I wanted was for the truth to come out. You deserve to feel free from him. Sarah, you deserve to move forward. She nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. And we sat in silence for what felt like hours. It was in those quiet moments, when Calder's employees whispered their fears and regrets to me, that I understood the full scope of what I'd done. I hadn't just exposed Mark's crimes. I'd exposed the system that allowed him to thrive. And for many, that truth felt just as damning. The investigation. A deeper cut. The weeks following Mark's downfall were consumed by the investigation. The FBI got involved after Liam and I handed over the files. And Calder's board members scrambled to distance themselves from Mark's fallout. Watching it unfold felt surreal. From my desk, I could see agents escorting corporate executives into private meeting rooms for questioning. Their faces pale and sweaty as they walked past the cubicles. I kept my head down. But I was acutely aware that I had become a legend among my peers. Whispers drifted toward me like shadows as people darted past my desk. Some called me brave, others called me reckless. I didn't care what they thought anymore. My focus was on ensuring that Mark didn't escape justice. One of the most satisfying days came when news broke that Mark had been arrested. I was home, curled up on my couch with a cup of tea, watching the evening news as the reporter described the charges. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. The list seemed endless. And there was Mark, being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs. His once pristine suit rumpled and his signature smirk replaced by a grim, defeated expression. I didn't cry. I didn't feel pity. I felt vindicated. Fallout. The end of Calder's era. As the investigation unfolded, Calder Enterprises began to collapse under the weight of Mark's crimes. Several board members resigned, lawsuits were filed, and employees fled the company in droves, desperate to avoid guilt by association. It would take years for Calder to recover, if it ever did. In the midst of the chaos, I received an email from the CEO, who had been suspiciously quiet throughout the ordeal. It was short, clinical, and unapologetic. Your actions have placed this company in jeopardy. I hope you understand the consequences of your decisions. Consequences. That word stuck with me. What about the consequences of their decisions? What about the lives they'd ruined by turning a blind eye to Mark's schemes? I never responded to the email. I didn't see the point. A farewell to Calder. I knew I couldn't stay at Calder forever. I'd become a symbol, a reminder of everything the company wanted to forget. But leaving wasn't as simple as handing in my resignation. I needed closure. Something to mark the end of this chapter. On my last day, I took a moment to walk through each floor of the building, absorbing every detail I could. The office had changed since that fateful town hall. The once bustling halls were quieter, the desks emptier, the cohesion fractured. I stopped by the break room, where Sarah had told me she felt liberated. It was empty now, save for a faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. I smiled faintly, letting the moment wash over me before turning to leave. When I reached my desk to pack up my things, Liam approached me, his expression solemn but warm. "You're really leaving, huh?" he asked. I nodded, slipping files into my bag. It's time. I've done enough here. He hesitated before handing me a card. Inside was a simple message. Justice isn't easy, but it's worth it. Thank you for reminding us of that. His words stayed with me long after I walked out of Calder Enterprises for the last time. Moving forward. The legacy of justice. Life after Calder was a slow rebuild. I spent weeks grappling with the emotional fallout, questioning whether I'd done enough or whether exposing Mark had been worth the cost. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that the consequences had been inevitable. Calder had been built on lies, and I'd simply forced those lies into the light. I started fresh, taking a job at a nonprofit dedicated to corporate transparency and ethics. The work was humbler than anything I'd done at Calder, but it was fulfilling in ways I couldn't have imagined. I found solace in knowing I was contributing to a world where people like Mark Ashford couldn't thrive unchecked. The final confrontation. Mark's trial. Several months later, I was asked to testify at Mark's trial. Walking into the courtroom, I felt the familiar sting of nerves clawing at my stomach. But I steeled myself, knowing this was my chance to ensure the scales of justice tip irrevocably against him. Mark sat at the defense table, hunched and gaunt. He looked like a shadow of the man who had smirked his way through meetings and charmed his way out of accountability. For the first time, I saw him as human. Not invincible, not untouchable, but broken. When I took the stand, I spoke with conviction, recounting the evidence I had uncovered, the lies I had exposed, and the harm Mark had caused to dozens of innocent people. My voice trembled at times, but I never faltered. By the time I finished, the room was silent, every eye fixed on me. Mark didn't meet my gaze. He didn't say a word. His silence was enough. A satisfying conclusion. Mark Ashford was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with additional fines to repay the massive sums he had stolen. Calder Enterprises continued to limp forward under new leadership, but the company was never able to wash away the stain of Mark's betrayal. For me, the victory wasn't just about the punishment. It was about ensuring that people like Mark could never wield unchecked power again. Justice isn't always clean. It's rarely simple, but standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible, that's what matters. And if my time at Calder taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes the truth isn't just powerful, it's unstoppable. Final word count. 2,875 words.